This is I Should Be Writing Season 20, Episode 21.
Wow.
Well, I should be writing. I should be working on my craft. I should be writing. I should be submitting my next draft. But I'm sitting home watching Doctor Who.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, we've been going for a while. Long time. Hi there. Welcome to I Should Be Writing. This is a podcast for wannabe fiction writers that's been going since 2005. Yeah, it can vote. No, not vote. Yes, vote.
No, yes,
yes, vote next year. And corporations are people, so it's time to incorporate. Really, that's the lesson we've learned. My name is Mur Lafferty, and I'm a writer. I'm frazzled today because I just turned in my 8th book, and what they say about each book teaches you only how to write that book, and the next time you write a book, it feels like you're starting at square one and you've learned nothing. That's all true. But I got it turned in, so we'll see. But that's I guess I start the show by giving accountability and saying what I'm working on, and that is I've been working. My ADHD deadline brain didn't kick in until very close to the deadline, so I've been pretty much writing straight from like 9 to 6 for the past several days, which isn't healthy, but it's what my brain wanted to do. I don't know. But whatever, if healthy or not, it's done. I'm delighted to have with me today a writer who I believe is not as frazzled as I am, Mary Pascual, the author of Walk the Web Lightly. How are you, Mary?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being patient with me.
I've been there. So I totally understand.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed that you can write that long in a day, because after a while, my brain shuts down. My ADHD brain says, I am overwhelmed now and not working. And then it just refuses. And I have to go take a break. So,
yeah. Well, my thinking was I would work into the night, but, my family and I are all mystery lovers and video game lovers, and so once everybody gets downstairs and starts a game or a TV show, we're all just kind of, it's nice downtime. And my kid just graduated from college and I'm still enjoying the time with them, so that's what I've been doing, and I think I needed it. I think if I'd gone like into the evening, that would have been bad. But yesterday my hands were hurting, and I knew that I had reached very close to my limit of how long I can do this.
Plus, I think it's important that we take those breaks so that our brain is still working unconsciously, and it's problem solving and it's writing even when we're not aware of it. So sometimes those breaks are great. They're actually, you're still working even when it feels like you're not.
Mm-hmm. My problem is breaks almost always mess up my flow. And I don't care if there's a timer. I don't care if there's a co-working buddy waiting for me. It's like once I take a break, time ceases to exist, and so does the importance of what I'm working on. And I don't know what to do about that because I know it's not healthy. So I don't think I didn't stop for lunch today. No. Should probably eat after we talk. But anyway,
I forgot about lunch as well, so I'm there with you. Yeah.
We are going to talk about mental health in a moment, but I do want to point out Underpope in chat says something very interesting. So many writers I know have ADHD, and so many people I know with ADHD are writers. Coincidence or conspiracy? I am not a neurologist, but I believe there's something about the ADHD brain that is, while we have so many flaws, we're also highly creative, and the hyperfocus helps that too. So, sometimes I feel like everybody I know has ADHD, and then I realize, almost everybody I know are people who are creative. or at least people I spend a lot of time with. So I think there's your coincidence. It's creative minds, all the synapses we have that are busted, that one's stronger than most, I would say. Do you have an opinion, Mary?
I agree with that. I also think, and I've done some reading on this, the ADHD mind also tends to be, it's not just a hyper focus when we super focus, but we actually have a tendency to, we notice a lot more details than neurotypical brains usually do. And so therefore, it actually lends itself really well to creativity, because I know that I notice the smell, the feel, the texture, and I can't, well, for an example, my husband will go into the kitchen and make himself something to eat, and he will spill salt all over the counter. Mm-hmm. Now, even though we have a white countertop, I still see that salt. He does not notice at all. Mm-hmm. But I do think that sometimes the fact that we notice so much, even though I know typically they say, oh, ADHD means you're not paying attention. It's actually the opposite. We are paying attention to actually a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's where we get distracted and overwhelmed.
We can't slow it down.
But it's a wonderful attribute to have when you go to create something. Mm-hmm. There's an attention to detail that, ADHD really helps with, since we're noticing all of that.
Yeah. But anyway, we want to talk about your new book that came out in May called Walk the Web Lightly. Do you want to give us the rundown of that?
Sure. Walk the Web Lightly is about a younger teen named Naya. She's just turned 14. She lives with her mother and grandmother. They're very protective of her, and they can all secretly see the lines of time. That means that they can see the past, which appears as one shining line behind each person, and they can also see all the potential lines that person might choose in front of them. So they can see time as these like strands of lights. Now, because of this gift, people like them have been kind of exploited and abused and persecuted over the years. So she comes from a culture that has been in hiding, and they keep on the move, and therefore her family is very protective of her. And they also have this really strong heritage of being artists. And it's just something that her mother and her grandmother both expect Naya to follow in her footsteps. But Naya really loves science and wants to be a doctor. And she also doesn't understand why she couldn't use her gift to help people. So this is a story about coming of age. Her grandmother, she wants to go to a medical science camp. Her grandmother is completely opposed, but she says, if you can complete your soul wrap, which is this artistic tradition that her people have, then they'll talk about her going to this camp. Otherwise, she has to say no to her science, dreams for good. And Naya is sure she can win this contest. But in the meantime, someone is kind of starting to manipulate events to find out their secrets. So it's all about, does Naya, even when you can see all of time, do you have the knowledge and wisdom to make the right choices? So coming of age story, very strong relationships between the three women, and lots of art versus science, but also how art and science can complement each other. So is my book.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Would you call it YA? Because people have called it coming of age, but would you call it YA? And if not, then why?
Okay, so I struggled with this because I thought this is either young YA, which there isn't a lot out there, and there is a little bit of a need for it, or it's a slightly older middle grade. But there are some themes. We decided on YA because there are some themes that she goes through later in the book that are definitely a little bit older. But I do feel like I really wanted to capture that kind of magical span of time when you are kind of on the cusp of, between middle grade and high school, or right in that realm where you don't have a ton of responsibilities yet, the days seem endless and everything's just open and potential. So because of the themes that kind of come out later in the book, I did call it YA. However, I do believe, today kids are really savvy. and they know what's going on. So I think it could cross age groups really easily. And I think it could cross into adult as well. I could think adults could enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I think I was watching Space Valkyrie stream and talk about Catching Fire came up. And I remember before right when the Hunger Games got big is when my kid and I discovered that Suzanne Collins had written an entire 5-book series for middle grade called Gregor the Overlander. And let's see, they were in middle school then? I think so. And so we were listening to these Gregor the Overlander, which is about a boy who goes into the underland and finds sentient bats and rats and another group of people living down there, and he goes to war with them. And it's neat knowing that Suzanne Collins has her hatred of war. Her story is her dad was a Vietnam vet, and tackles PTSD, and tackles that a lot. But it's one of those things where I was shocked at how it was middle grade because of all the action. And there's this scene in one of the later books that made me want to cry when you've got this boy looking in the mirror and saying, I can't ever take my shirt off at the doctor's because they will think I'm being abused or something. And that's one thing that never comes out in adventure books, that kind of thing. And but I've got on a huge tangent that's not about your book, and I'm sorry about that. But it's thinking about the where books are shelved is fascinating to me. I also had the problem of I thought my kid was not ready to read it or see the movie, and then I realized that I'd read it much younger. And so I don't know what I was. A lot of people my generation read Stephen King way too early.
Yes, I definitely read books I read 1984 when I was 12. And I followed up with Brave New World, which I think was even scarier. There wasn't much of a YA section, so we kind of were just right into adults. I think that's why I think it's more the gatekeepers. And I absolutely know, because same thing, there are books that I would not have wanted my son to read, but then I thought about it and I'm like, but I read it. And when I talk with young people, they are much more up on news and current events and things that are going on than we realize. But I think it's this idea that there's parents and, librarians and teachers who think, oh, no, that's not appropriate, because we want to keep our kids younger. And they're actually, they can both be innocent and naive and still have knowledge of things that are going on in the world, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want to ever, dumb anything down for kids. Yeah. So I try to put myself what did I know and what was I feeling experienced when I was that age? It's what I do. The only downside to that is, as you said, there's people of probably our generation, and we were, kind of half feral because we weren't parented much. Yeah. So we were probably getting to things that we did not need to get into. So try to temper it a little bit. But yes, I just try to remember that age when I'm writing.
Yeah. So your book touches on a lot of what feels like old world magic or mythology. How did you decide to approach it as a time seeing thing? And did you base it off of mythology, or were you is this all your stuff?
So it's kind of a little bit of both. So when I was writing my first book, this character, sometimes when we're writing, we can have where we think it's going, and then something unexpected can pop up. So
yes, all the time.
I had this character pop up, and he probably didn't even need to be in the first book, but he kind of popped into my head, and I wrote him out, and I loved him so much. And he could see time in the same way. And in my head, I called him Gideon the Spider. And then that made me think, and it was because he was kind of long and, one of these tall, thin people. But then it started making me think of Arachne and, some of those. And I was looking up spider myth, because this is what our ADHD brains do, right? Something pops up, and then we go down a rabbit hole. And I actually found a myth about a spider and a snake, and how they're both natural enemies, and the spider is like really clever and the snake is relentless and and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I would really love to explore kind of those power dynamics, of one pursuing the other. And so I kind of blended, but I said, but I don't want to do the character I wrote in the first book. I want a younger character. And so I decided that to create this other character, Naya, who's actually the daughter of that character in the first book, even though neither book actually talks about that. But maybe that will come out in a story later on. Mm-hmm. And then, so I was kind of weaving in this myth, this idea from this myth. And I liked the whole idea of Arachne from Greek mythology. And I started creating her character. And then at one point I went back to find that myth again, and I could never find it. Like it had completely, so I was like, whoa. So I read it at kind of the right time. So there definitely is, but I did read one review of my book who had said, oh, this is the Three Fates, which the retelling. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I did not intend that at all. But if the reader finds it, that's great. Yeah. So I would say most of it is my creation. There's just a couple of like small elements I was inspired by the myth rather than retelling the myth.
Right. So this is your second book. As Space Valkyrie said in the chat, unhappily, which is the good to know that every book is its own thing. And I get your despair, and I have felt it, but I do want to say that at least when you come up against something that is part of the process. It's like, getting used to rejections. That doesn't mean you have to stop being a writer. It's when you hit a wall or something, or struggle with something, you just work through it because you did the last time. And I'm trying to kind of weasel out of my guests. Can you tell me like something that you ran up against while writing this that really slowed you down? And either mental health, or thinking that it's terrible, or thinking that you're terrible, or writer's block, or whatever. I'm just trying to go show people what professional writers also deal with.
Well, I have 2 books out, so I still kind of consider myself really new. It's like I like the idea of professional writer, but I still feel really new.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
I think one of the things that really got in my way is I was finishing this up during the pandemic, and I tend to be a little bit of a slower writer. And so it's the pandemic. I'm trying to work through it. And there's just this internal pressure, like, well, you're almost done. Get it done. And that actually really gets in my way. And I end up creating a lot of pressure for myself. And then I need to let go of that type of thing. Like trying to say you need to produce it at a certain time. And I'm always wrong. I am always wrong. I always think, oh, I only need this much more to go. And it's not correct. So that tends to get in the way a lot. I'm really working hard to let go of that idea that I need to get it done in a certain amount of time. And the other thing that always gets in my way is that there is, without fail, every time I write anything, there is a point where I'm writing this character and I just run into, who is this? I don't know who this is. What am I doing? I don't know who this person is. And then I get in my head and I do the whole self-doubt thing. And it's like, well, maybe you really can't write. And, it's not a great mental state to write from. And I get really frustrated with myself. So that tends to slow me down. And then I will get into the kind of the overwhelm and then just sit in front of the TV or play games on my phone. And it's just a cycle, right? It's like either of those two things, whether I'm pushing myself to finish when it's not finished yet, or I decide I don't know what I'm doing, they're self-feeding cycles, right? Because I get overwhelmed because of those thoughts. And then I sit down and I'm not working. And in my head, it's like, but you should be working. And so it just kind of cycles around. So those definitely come into play. And But it's funny because I just went to a conference where there was a whole panel on wellness as a writer. And, and that's where the panel was talking about, you are working even when you're sitting there doing nothing, because when they actually map creativity on a neurological level, that there are states of the brain when you're doing what you think is nothing where it's actually working. So I'm really working on trying to silence the voice in my head and not buy into the pressure of, well, you better write really fast and you better get it out the door, because that just is not, it doesn't work for me. It puts me in an unhappy state. So, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I try to do when that happens to me is I know I can start and finish a story. And so at least that part is wrong. Whatever my inner bully is telling me, that part is wrong, because I know I can do that. And, when you prove it wrong one or more times, that helps you think maybe they weren't right the first with that other thing. But we have an ad break incoming, so we're going to take a moment and grab some water or take your meds or get a stretch, and we will be back in about a minute and a half.
Okay. Oh, no, that's okay. We have these lights that go on with movement, and I always have to do at it.
Oh, yes, of course.
I have to do the magic swirl whenever, yeah.
You just can't stop. It's always gotta do that. So what are you working on now?
I am working on my third book. So both my books and the third book they're standalone, but they're set in the same universe. Sorry about that. So there's relations, but things haven't crossed over yet, but they might in the future. The book I'm working on now, and I've just started, is I don't have a title for it yet, but it's basically about a young man who runs away from his home after a family tragedy, only to meet up with a dysfunctional family circus that's secretly under a curse. And we're going to explore like love and forgiveness and lots of themes like that. And they're actually not just under a regular circus curse, but they were a whole country and its court, the king and queen and the family. And they were put under a curse, and basically everyone lost memory of them, and they are cursed to travel as this circus. So I'm having fun with that, though it is taking a lot of research. Like you think, oh, I'm going to write about a circus, and then you need to go actually know a lot about circuses. So,
yeah, it's good to start building your writerly stable of people you can turn to. And, in social media land, that's actually pretty easy. I know Ursula Vernon just has to put out on Twitter, like, hey, all you frog people or frog fans, answer this question for me. And they will all come out and answer the frog question for Ursula. If there's a frog question Ursula doesn't know the answer to. But I have a doctor I can text and just say, how would this happen? How would this happen if you didn't treat it? What's the worst that could happen without losing the hand and stuff like that? So it's good. It's good to do that. So who did you turn to for circus information?
I am at the beginning I've been reading some books and I've been doing a lot of research online. My next step is to start reaching out to people. I've met someone recently who worked briefly for a circus. So yeah, I probably will put the call out on Twitter, on Threads, see if anybody pops up. I mean, I've studied a little bit of circuses in the past because it was something that I had researched for school. I just want to make sure I have everything right and that it's respectful. Though the saving grace is that I don't have it completely the same as, true circus culture, because they've been kind of forced into it. Because I know that circus people are, that is a culture in of itself. But yeah, I need to find some live people that I can speak with. So I'm working on that.
Yeah. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about mental health, and I feel like I've been talking about mental health for 20 years, and when I started, it wasn't. I still felt like we had to tell people you can be creative and take antidepressants, and it's not going to just dull your creativity, because there was a lot of harmful talk a while ago about that kind of thing. But now, actually making sure your brain is healthy is a thing to strive for anybody. The whole ADHD thing is it's a mess. I find what I like is when I'm scrolling through TikTok or Instagram, a lot of people do like, here's what it's like to have ADHD, and then they do a cute, funny thing, and I'm like, cool. What do I do about it? And it's like, it's very frustrating that's as far as it goes. And I don't need people to be my therapist, but I feel like there's an awful lot of, hey, look at that thing that's wrong or different. I don't know what the word is, but how do you approach it?
I have the same thing. I actually just read a different book, if you don't mind me plugging somebody else.
Please.
And this book was called ADHD for Smart-Ass Women. Oh,
yes. I listened to that podcast.
Okay, yes. And so I thought that book was fantastic. It had a lot of great strategies. I've actually never really felt like my, ADHD or neurodivergent. I long suspected that I was, but I'd already developed coping mechanisms that were actually very similar to the ones that they recommend anyways.
Yeah.
And so it just was later in life that it got harder to. So it's funny. I actually love seeing some of the TikTok videos when they talk about that, because there's lots of things where I'm like, oh, I can relate to that too. And so I feel like it's important that those of us that have these things feel seen and recognized. What I don't like, though, is with the videos where they'll have like the neurodivergent person and then the so-called neurotypical person, where the neurotypical person is kind of laughing at the neurodivergent person. It's like, stop laughing so hard. Give me a break,
Yeah.
So, but I really love, this is a patch. So my son actually is ADHD and has sensory processing disorder. And then I also had an older brother growing up that actually had some brain damage from birth. So he had some, mental disadvantages. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up around it my whole life. And I refuse to feel like or believe that it is, a detriment. I mean, honestly, there's so many things about ADHD that I personally love. I mean, it's hard. I remember growing up and people, always wanted to act like I was a little bit of a nerd, or they called me a weird girl or whatnot like that. But I liked who I was. And I always kind of felt like, well, geez, you people have no perspective, because I think that I love the term neurodiversity, because I think that we're a spectrum of people. Yeah. And from an evolutionary standpoint, we all needed different skills. And there's some really valuable skills that ADHD brains have. I know it's a struggle for a lot of people, because our current society is just now starting to accommodate and recognize, really. But, back when we were hunter and gatherers, and it was those people were probably pretty prized, I mean, mm-hmm. They're alert, they can spring into action. You look at people who work as emergency rooms or EMTs, a lot of them also have it. There are a lot of great benefits. So I think
the able to keep your head in a crisis is an interesting thing that I've heard of. Did not know that could happen with an ADHD brain. So that's interesting about the EMT thing.
Yeah, I absolutely completely do that. My husband actually had a health scare, and I needed to call 911 and get him. And I just do the super focus. And I honestly, that hyper focus probably went on for 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, that's a really bad crash at the end. And there was some PTSD around. He was in the hospital for a long time. Mm-hmm. But, the ability to just keep very quickly sum up and act on things and prioritize is a great, great skill to have. So, yeah, I don't, I actually don't feel all that bad for being ADHD. I honestly, I enjoy other neurodivergent people. I think that I'm hilarious and fun, and even if it's a little weird sometimes. But that's what makes life interesting is the diversity. So
yeah, I keep thinking about all the things that. I mean, I was diagnosed a couple of years ago, and I'm still learning. Oh, that thing is an ADHD thing. I didn't realize the way I wore my socks had to do with sensory problems. No clue. And then I saw someone do a TikTok about that. I'm like, that's a thing? That's not just me being weird? And I think of everything else I have about me being weird and thinking, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I had to advocate for my son quite a bit because when he started school, sensory processing was not really a big thing. So I was going in and having to educate teachers, and he did OT and all sorts of things. And his was when he was younger, it's developmental. So when he was younger, it's at the worst, and then you kind of learn coping mechanisms. But I'm amazed. Like, I thought that I knew quite a bit about ADHD, but I think I knew more from boys and from older stuff that I learned a long time ago. So studying it now with as an adult woman and how it presents an adult woman has been really interesting. There's this thing called revenge bedtime procrastination.
I know, that's amazing. Tell us about it.
Okay, and I love that name. It makes me feel totally cool. And, but it basically, when you are avoiding your whole bedtime routine, so you stay up too late just because you're avoiding the routine, or you've had a really hard day. And so you're basically kind of taking revenge on the day by saying, no, I'm going to stay. This is the only time I have to relax. So I'm going to stay up.
Yeah.
Yes. Even though you're tired and you would be better if you went to sleep. So I just learned that one. I was like, okay, that's a fantastic, name. And, it's actually, and I was like, I had no idea I was doing this, but this is exactly what I do. I stay up so late that I'm too tired to fall asleep. And yeah, it's fun. So I just thought that was cool. Yeah. I mean, it's not great. That is not a healthy strategy, but recognizing it and especially when I can recognize it and then actually go, okay, I can make it into something fun. Then I'm more aware. And I don't do it as often. So that's what's great about all the things coming out.
Yeah. Well, me saying, you know what, that extreme reaction you just had, that might be the rejection sensitivity thing that you've had your whole life, and people, including your best friends when you were a kid, really, really criticized you for. So maybe sit back and think, is this an appropriate reaction? Can I calm down? So I pretty much, internalize all the rejection sensitivity crap, but it's still there. It's bad. I like it when I see other people act on a feeling that I have and they look like a jerk, and I think, oh, I'm right to keep that inside. Okay. And just the long time ago when podcasting was new, somebody was one of the first big articles to come out about it was released, and I thought, they didn't talk to me. And then another friend I had went online and said, they didn't talk to me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll stay down here. I'll just stay down here and whine to myself, to my husband. We're good. Yeah. The internet does not need to hear me talk about this. So, but yeah, it was learning how to channel things. Now I just try to figure out how to dampen it a little bit, but that's the next thing.
Yeah. Or I also, sometimes you just have to go away. It's like, I'll just walk away and process this and then come back and see if I'm processing this appropriately. Yeah. And do I need to verbalize it?
Yes.
That's a big thing. Because I know sometimes there's that you want to blurt it out, especially online. And it's just like, okay, don't do that. So
we had talked about social media a tiny bit, but you were talking about TikTok before we got started. And because I'm still afraid of TikTok, I'm asking every writer I know who seems to have a good what's the word I'm looking for? Presence there, or Instagram. They're kind of the same thing right now. What do you, like, how do you approach that? Because I'm still kind of a TikTok coward.
So I was very uncomfortable with it too, honestly. And, but I try to, not every day, but, you know, I try to push myself when out of my comfort zone every once in a while. I figure it's just good practice. So I thought that, I can't even remember why. Somehow I convinced myself to try TikTok. I'm like, but I don't remember how I talked myself into it. But I realized that if I did it the first few times, and it took a long time. It took many takes. It took lots of editing. I was really floundering around. I was totally scared. And then eventually I was like, you know what? And I started watching. I think the thing that helped me is I started watching other people more and more. And there are the people that are super glam and they never say the word or which are my favorite words. And they can deliver great and they're super well groomed. And then there's the other ones who are just like, well, I messed that up. Whoops, you know, and I'm like, that's what I need to do. I need to just embrace that I'm going to mess up, and I can be a little nerdy, and I don't mind that. And, you know, and so that's kind of what I started doing. I just started doing them faster. If I really find I also had to learn to pause. This is a big tip I would tell anybody who wants to get in TikTok. When you're taping yourself, pause between your sentences so that if you can cut them together. I'm still not very good at that. I still want to do the and that's the part I'm working on. But see, I just did it again. It's my favorite word. I think just doing it off the cuff, trying to be your most authentic self, and this is who you are, and you're going to find people who like you. You know, I guess I don't have a ton of followers. I'm fairly new. I would love to have more, but I really love engaging with people and other writers and readers and people in the community. So that's kind of my goal for it. But I would give it a try. Yeah. Even though it's, you know, because this is the best thing too. The other thing I do is I tape on my phone with the iPhone's recorder. I don't tape directly on TikTok because that's too much. Then I can look at it and decide whether I want to, and edit it and decide whether I want to put it up or not. But if you just grow right into TikTok and you're using a filter and you're doing this and that, it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to tell us about your book or your life or social media, mental health, or TikTok, or anything we didn't mention?
Well, I know that this podcast will focus on beginning writers, and I just kind of want to say that I love it when people write. I love encouraging people to write. I especially love when young people are interested in it. Yeah. And I think that I would like to say for everyone out there who thinks, well, I'd love to write, but I can't do it. We put so much emphasis on STEM, on science and math, that people think that those are the most important skills. But we use our words every single moment. We think in words, we're using our words constantly, we communicate. So to the beginning writers out there, I would say you're probably better than you think you are because you're actually practicing words every single moment. And if anyone just wants to give it a try, I say give it a try. All right. I really love writers and readers.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Where can we find you online?
I have my websites at marypascual.com. You can find me there with all of my socials. I used to blog for a long time under the handle The Weird Girl, so you will see The Weird Girl just pop up. I believe I'm Mary the Weird Girl on Instagram. On TikTok, I'm Mary Pascual 71. So any combination of those two. But when in doubt, go to marypascual.com and just click on any of the links on the homepage.
Excellent. Mine is murverse.com, where you can find links to the podcast, links to the Hugo finalist semi-prosing escape pod that I edit with Valerie Valdez, who's in chat, who I didn't say hello to. Hello, Valerie. Glad to see you. And let's see, I do podcasts, I do the magazine, and I do books. Midsolar Murders 2 is out now. It is called Chaos Terminal. And I used to have a book to show to the camera, but I think I cleaned up, so that's bad. But anyway, if you look it up online, you can find it. And my next one hopefully will be out in April, and it is called Infinite Archive. And I just turned it in today. So, thank you to the live chat, and thank you to Mary, and you guys should be writing. Thank you for listening to I Should Be Writing, the longest running writing podcast in existence. This episode was made possible by the Fabulous, who support the podcast via Patreon or Substack. Join the Fabulous at patreon.com/mightymur or mightymur.substack.com. Theme music provided by John Anelio. Art provided by Numbers Ninja, and podcast hosting provided by Libsyn. This episode is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 license. You can find all of my books and podcasts at murverse.com.
I should be writing. I should be submitting my next draft, but I'm sitting home watching Doctor Who. I'm sitting home watching Doctor